Welcome to the Female Flex. I'm your host, Stacy Nichols, owner of spiritualvirago.com, and this is my very first episode, so thank you for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about how peak experiences are crucial for spiritual growth. So the person that really invented the term peak experience was Abraham Maslow, and he was really the father of what is called positive psychology. So unlike, for example, Sigmund Freud, who studied dysfunctional people, Maslow studied high-functioning, successful, high-achieving people. And one of the things that he observed was that the people he studied all seemed to have reported having these, quote, peak experiences that, pushed them ahead in their careers and bettered their lives and seemed to enrich them in some kind of a way. So if you're not really sure what a peak experience is, Brené Brown refers to them as God moments. Athletes will frequently call it being in the zone. That's probably more like what I would refer to it as because of my track and field background. And Maslow has, 16 common elements that he observed in these peak experiences that he studied from the positive psychology people, and I'll run through those for you right now. So, sense of unity of self, oneness with the environment, an experience of peak power, so that I feel like definitely touches on the athletic side of this experience, non-forced, self-determination, free of inhibition, spontaneity, purposeless creativity, timelessness, pinnacle of individuality, merging of self and other, because a lot of times people say falling in love is a peak experience, right? Unmotivated by needs, artistic expression, sense of completion, playfulness, and surprise happenings. So, a lot of different things there. I mean, I feel like there's some overlap with this list, but there's a lot of meat here. So for me personally, when I think about peak experiences, definitely the first thing that comes to my mind is my experience with track and field. I started running when I was 6 years old, and I ran all the way up through college, was an NCAA All-American in high jump. So I had a lot of experience with this, and I started to observe maybe in late elementary school or junior high, around that time. My mom would tell me at my track meets, she would say, how come you didn't hear me, yelling for you, from the stands? And I would say, well, I don't hear anything when I run. And, we're talking about the 100-meter dash, which is run right in front of where everyone is sitting. I mean, if you're in lane 8, you put your arm out, you could touch somebody. That's how close you are to the stadium. So it struck me as interesting, like, why wouldn't I hear all these people, yelling for me and cheering? I mean, there's a bunch of us, and we've all got our families cheering for us, and friends, and, schoolmates, and whatever. And that's when I really started to think about, well, something must really happen when I'm competing, And I also started to notice about the same time, this really coincided with my own kind of spiritual evolution, because it was really starting to learn a lot, about coincidences and, synchrodestiny and all that kind of stuff around the same time. So everything kind of dovetailed, right? But I think the main thing, couple of things that always stuck out to me was not only I was just oblivious to hearing anything else. But for me, the biggest thing was always that it didn't necessarily feel like time stopped, but I felt like sort of a suspension of time, as if, like, maybe you could describe it like as if you were in a time tunnel. Like, time is passing, you're not frozen, but it doesn't seem to be passing the way that it normally does, at the same sort of speed and intensity that it normally would, right? So, for example, let's say you're running a 13-second race. We'll take the 100-meter, for example. It should be over in, really, it's a flash, 13 seconds. Based on junior high girls' times. Anyway, but the experience of the race, I mean, this whole thing should, how long could it take you to explain 13 seconds of your life? But when you think back on it, you could talk about that 100 meters and what's happening and the things that you observed. And I mean, for 10 or 20 minutes, you could, really, like us track nerds, you could dissect 100 meters for 15 or 20 minutes. So there's this feeling of like a richness of time, like it's more texture. I don't know if that explains it well. So when I really started thinking about this, in addition to my experiences with track, the time thing reminded me of giving birth, which I would say anyone that's been through that experience would list it as a peak experience, a God moment, in the zone, all of those things wrapped into one. I always felt like when I was pregnant, why is it that no other woman can really explain to me with, concrete detail what it's like to give birth? Because anybody, going through that 9 months, you are just grabbing for information. You want to know what to expect. You want to be prepared. You want to just have all the information available for mental preparation, but also, nesting and all that kind of stuff. So I started to feel like a couple months into this, like there seems to be something missing from all these stories. And I'm asking like all the women I run into, can you tell me what it was like to give birth? And like, they really couldn't, well, yeah, I remember it being painful. And, it seemed like that's not how you talk about something being that painful, Well, of course, then I give birth, and I had a home birth with a midwife, gave birth to my daughter on my bed, drug-free, definitely a peak experience. And after I had been through it, then I understood. It's like you're in this terrible pain, but at the same time, you're not feeling the pain the way that you normally feel pain. There's no way you could, think of how much it hurts just when you like stub your toe on the corner of the furniture, right? And you're screaming and, obscenities and throwing your hands up, and, you're just like, I need to bite down on a leather strap for a second, right? It's just this intense pain. Clearly giving birth is much worse than that, but we're not, throwing our hands up and screaming and biting on a leather strap and all the things. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Clearly there's all sorts of hormonal things involved when you're giving birth, but to me, it stuck out immediately as being something that would fit in as a peak experience because of this sort of time tunnel feeling and kind of a gray area-ness to it, right? Like when you're running and you don't hear anything, but you're aware that people are there, and you're aware of it in like a dizzy tunnel kind of way, if that makes sense. And I feel like giving birth, for me anyway, was very similar to that. Like I can look back on it and I remember all the different segments. There was this many centimeters and then that many centimeters, and the time when I tried to sit on the yoga ball and the part where I tried to get in the birthing pool, and I remember all the sections of it. But the pain part, I'm aware that it happened, but I don't remember it like in the same way that I remember, for example, when I broke my hand. I really remember that pain in a different way, in a more clear and crisp way. Anyway, I wanted to talk also about, in the kind of field of peak experiences, but I wanted to talk also about ayahuasca, which I tried in July. Yeah, it was in like the last week of July, and that experience of doing the ayahuasca was actually what led me to create spiritualvirago.com. It had a huge impact on me. But for me, I've never been drunk. I've never smoked anything. I've never done any drugs. So it was a really big risk for me to try the ayahuasca because I'm just really not into substances and, foreign things like that in my body. I understand that it came from a leaf or a root or whatever, but it is a toxin. Your body throws it up. Your body reacts to it as food poisoning. Yes, the mold that grew on the food that you ate that gave you food poisoning, that's nature too, but that doesn't mean that it's good for you. When your body's reacting with purging, you've got food poisoning. You know what I mean? That's not something that's supposed to be in your body. So I felt like during the experience of the ayahuasca, there's clearly that same sense of like this kind of suspended time tunnel sort of thing, but still a clear awareness of I know where I am and I know what's happening and I'm aware of my body and all that kind of stuff. But I did notice that same feeling of that time tunnel. However, for me, I felt like because the ayahuasca peak experience was chemically induced, to me it wasn't the same. It really wasn't. I felt like when I get in the zone because I'm, running on like high octane sort of God fuel or whatever, if you will, that to me was a completely different experience than kind of being in that time tunnel-y, chemically induced peak experience or peak state. And for me, I feel like I have no desire to ever repeat the ayahuasca experience because I know what an organic peak experience feels like, and I much prefer that. I would much prefer to do the work of meditating or to do the work of learning how to lucid dream or to do the work of hiking up the mountain and getting the blisters on my feet so I can see eye to eye Mount Rainier. To me, that work or that effort, and also just the mental prep time of like hiking up the mountain or rock climbing or whatever it is that you're doing, that is part of it. I feel like that pinnacle of having worked towards something makes the peak experience more valuable towards pushing us forward, right? Like if you go on my website, spiritualvirago.com, and you check out the article I wrote on this topic, I start with a quote from Tony Robbins, and I think this is so true, and I think this is really the entire point of this, condensed down into one sentence, so kudos to Tony, but he says, all lasting change happens in an altered state. And to me, that's the whole thing in a nutshell. That's why peak experiences are contributing to spiritual growth, right? You tell yourself, every year a New Year's resolution, I'm going to do this. I got to change that. Every year, same resolution, same resolution, same resolution. Let me use an example, okay? I have been DJing for 12 or 13 years, okay? And always wanted to learn how to scratch. And every new year, gonna learn to scratch. This is the year I'm gonna learn to scratch. Gonna learn to scratch this year. And I never did it. And then with two female DJ friends of mine, one of my friends actually took the whole day off of work to make this happen. We carpooled together from San Diego to LA, so 2.5 hour drive, so that we could attend a female scratching, what we thought was going to be a class taught at the Beat Junkies DJ school in LA. Well, when we get there, it's not a class. It's like a long round table where they've got set up all these different sets of turntables all around the table in a circle. And there's people, other female DJs all around the table. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go around and everyone's going to scratch for like 16 beats. Right? And I'm like, the three of us were not prepared to perform in front of everyone. We thought, we'd have like our little workstations. You're listening to yourself in your headphones or whatever. We're like, oh my God. None of us were prepared for this, but I was especially not prepared because once started coming around the table, I'm like, oh my God, the other people here clearly know what they're doing. Like my level of scratching at this point, did not involve any use of the crossfader. It was just a couple of baby scratches, So very training wheels. And after they skipped over me 2-3 times around the table, my friends are really like, dude, we drove all the way up here. It's a safe place, just do it. And I'm like, oh my God. The people leading this round table were like, if you're in the DJ world, this will mean something to you, but DNC champions, Patty Clover, Nikki Duran, these girls know how to scratch, okay? Patty has a YouTube channel with like a bazillion followers teaching them how to scratch, okay? She knows what she's doing. Like, oh God, okay, I'm gonna scratch in front of, Patty and Nikki. Here we go. Like, I'm terrified, okay? That ended up clearly being a peak experience for me. This was in like November. On the way home, the three of us, me and my two other female DJ friends, we agreed, January 1st, we're doing 100 Days of Scratching, which is this thing started by another DJ school called the School of Scratch. You can check it out if you're into DJing, hashtag 100 Days of Scratching. Anyway, because of having had that kind of peak experience of being literally pushed off the dock into the water of scratching, we were all super motivated. If that peak experience had never happened, I'm sure we would still every new year be saying, hey, this is going to be the year I learned to scratch. This is going to be the year I learned to scratch. So, I do think there's a lot of truth to peak experiences being a huge part of spiritual growth, because those are really the moments that reach out and grab us, right? Another thing I wanted to touch on, which I understand Abraham Maslow studied, positive psychology and high achieving people and blah, blah, blah. But when I looked at the experiences in my life that really made lasting change, yes, there's definitely these positive experiences of, well, I wouldn't say the ayahuasca was a good experience. It was very traumatizing for me. But all my track in the zone moments and definitely giving birth and all my time backpacking, hiking, growing up in Washington State, positive. But when I really look at the experiences, all of the experiences in my life in which I feel sort of that time tunnel feeling, The other ones are going to be like being raped and being abused. So I really feel like, is trauma a peak experience? And do all peak experiences have to be positive? I mean, really, if you look at this list of these traits of a peak experience, definitely not all of these things like playfulness, artistic expression, clearly not all of these things are going to overlap with trauma. But clearly, he wrote this from a point of view of positive psychology. But I do think, for me personally, I feel like my traumas were peak experiences. They had the same long-term effect on my life in that they sort of, really, it's like God reaching out of the clouds and grabbing you hard out of your chest, or striking you with lightning and saying, hey, I'm talking to you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't get any more real than that. But I think that's something that, is worth exploring. And for me, I do talk about that a lot in the article, which you'll see if you pop onto the blog. The other thing I wanted to talk about before I wrap it up is things that we can do to open ourselves up to having more peak experiences. So, couple of things. If you believe in miracles, you're more likely to have more peak experiences. And the research, again, is in the article. So, a couple of things that you can do. First of all, by putting yourself in situations where peak experiences are more likely to occur, of course, you're opening yourself up to have more of them. So if you go out hiking, if you're doing sports, if you're rock climbing and backpacking, and that connection with nature seems to be a common element for experiencing these type of God moments. And of course, sports, anything where you're really pushing yourself to the max. I think, running at 100% of your capacity, basketball where you're in sync with the whole team, all those kind of things. So put yourself in those positions, and when you're in kind of a peak experience friendly activity, turn your phone off, like off. Maybe meditate first. Meditation is a huge way of kind of letting our mental dust settle so that we can see clearly, and any messages from the universe that need to be seeping in, or inspiration that we've been looking for or needing, any of that kind of stuff is more likely to break through all of our mental chatter if the chatter has a break in it. And you can have a break in the chatter by meditating. Another thing, I use this a lot for all kinds of things, but I like to listen to those subliminal MP3s that are free on YouTube. I also, before I gave birth, I did buy a subliminal, positive birthing experience MP3 from Amazon, and I did purchase that. It was less than $5. They're not expensive, but there are some available on YouTube as well. So anyway, but you can go to YouTube and you just type in subliminal miracles, and you'll find MP3s that have these subliminal messages about, I believe in miracles happen every day, I'm attracting miracles to my life. And if you've never listened to a subliminal recording, you're just going to hear waves crashing or rain, or a Tibetan singing bowl, massage music kind of sound. But underneath there, where our conscious mind is not here and our subconscious picks up on these basically affirmations that are being read. So there's no negative side effects of this, whether it's effective or not effective for you. It's certainly not hurt anything. It's not an investment of any kind. You really don't have anything to lose. So that's an idea. And let's see. I think that's about it. In the article, I end with a quote from Socrates, who says, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And the reason that kind of jumped out at me as something to tie up the article with is because when we put the thought into wanting to have more peak experiences, appreciating them for what they are, these are moments that make positive changes for me or that push me forward on my spiritual evolution. When we're aware of those things, that's, any kind of awareness or any knowingness pushes us more closer to mastery, which is what we're doing here. That's what we're taking up space on the planet for. So anyway, thank you again so much for tuning into The Female Flex. I'm Stacey Nichols, owner of spiritualvirago.com. Have a great day.